Hi, my name is Ken Asselson. I wrote the Microbiome prescription website, and this is a video whose goal is to try to explain for the layperson some of the special study results which have come out and why and how they work. First, quick background. I have a Master of Science, Operation Research and Statistics, was a high school science teacher, also a college and university instructor, and I'm high functioning autism. And being high functioning autism means a variety of things. Some people are prodigies in terms of, let's say, music, just hear something and they can play and replicate it, etc. And generally what they are excellent at varies greatly. What I am good at is a couple of things which are common for many people with autism, especially high functioning. One is uber focus. I can just go in and just absolutely concentrate on something where well beyond the boredom level for a lot of other people. So I can just keep going in and going and going. Almost obsessive compulsive, except it's not obsessive compulsive, but it is heavily, deeply focused, blinkered, looking at something and just going in deep, etc. Second characteristic is the interesting characteristic of some autistic people, which is the ability to handle massively complex data without any major effort. So those are two of the things that are the background for my site, because basically I'm dealing with a very complicated system called the microbiome. I'm also having to creating the site, having to do a massive amount of data mining, a lot of long hours, keeping a very precise focus on what is actually going on in terms of reading the literature, plus of course the ability to read the literature. Was in a very early STEM program called the Berg Science Seminars, which was very, very selective. We in grade 10 wrote university academic scholarship exams as the selection criteria. So the result is you just had to be good at science and logical thinking to get into the program. The other thing is I spend most of my career life either doing statistics or being a software developer, including principal software developer or principal architect for a large number of firms. Starbucks was the last one, but before that I was an early Amazon person, and also Microsoft, as well as GG Northwest, now known as Verizon. So I've been in the high IT spectrum for a long time, which meant that I had the skills to efficiently write a very complicated site without needing to have a massive team or massive investment funds to be able to produce the site. So that's sort of the background of me as to how the site came to being. It was a confluence of a bunch of separate individual ideas. So with that much for introduction, I want to take a look at what the special studies are. Special studies are going in and looking at the citizen science aspect of the site. People have uploaded samples, and with the uploaded samples, they have annotated symptoms they have. And one of the things I realized early trying to understand the data is that the official diagnosis and the microbiome are poorly associated, but symptoms and the microbiome are strongly associated, which means you really want to treat the symptoms. Why? Because symptoms are often associated with 15 different conditions. But guess what? It seems that those 15 different conditions, when somebody has a symptom, they also have particular microbiome shifts, which means what? We don't have to treat the condition or look at trying to figure out how to treat a condition to reduce the symptoms. Some cases, like for chronic fatigue syndrome, the whole condition is a symptom combination, over 120 different symptoms there. And I had personal experience with chronic fatigue syndrome, hence that's how I started to recognize it, because when I start seeing, wait a minute, there's patterns there. And seeing patterns is, again, a autism characteristic for some autistic subsets. Okay, so much for that. Now, from all this magical donations from people, which I thank you. And if you haven't annotated your sample, please, please, please do, because everything I'm going to be talking about comes from people annotating it. Do pay back, do pay forward, annotate your samples so that we can get more information to help more people, and that people to be helped will include yourself. So get busy annotating samples with the symptoms you have for the samples. And if you have uploaded samples in the past and can remember some of the key symptoms, go back and annotate those old samples, please. Okay, now, so we have that, and now we end up doing some mathematics, and there's several mathematical techniques are used, and this was done by basically, how to say it, the classic one, the one which most statisticians will understand, which is very easy. We take a look at our reference population. I'll use the word reference to control for a variety of reasons, because control population is generally somebody with absolutely no symptoms. In this case, we have reference population being people who don't report the symptom, being our reference, effectively our control. And because of that assumption, we end up with a wonderful situation. Most clinical studies looking at differences will have 25 people in the sample and 25 people, healthy people, in the control. Total sample size, 50. But with only 50, your ability to make statistical detection it gets sparse. You need to have very strong relationship, strong associations to be able to get statistical significance. When we go over into having over 1,000 for your reference and 50 or 100 for your study, your ability to detect things goes up sky high. And why does the ability to detect goes? Because it's based on the standard deviation of the values for the average, as well as the number in it. And the number is a divisor. So if you have, let's say, 100 plus or minus 10, but you have 1,000, then your actual standard deviation of the mean may be down to 1, and you bring in your study of just 50 people, and you calculate it has a standard deviation of 20, and you divide it by population, and it becomes down 4. It means one case the standard deviation is 1, the other case is 4. Combining them together, you probably end up with something like 3. So if the difference in mean is 3 or less, or mean times 2.96, you end up having statistical significance showing up. Whereas if you have a small sample, then your the standard deviation between the means may be 50 or 60 or 70, in which case you're not going to see these small differences. So that's one of the reasons which we are finding things which you won't find in most clinical studies, because, well, simply, the sample size is too small. The total sample size does not allow the fine detection of statistical associations. Okay, so with that much said, let's go into a little explanation of some of the things I'm looking at. Something which I call KEGG, which is the Kyoto Encyclopedia of Genogenomics. When I came across the site, I said, oh joy, okay. I'm constantly dealing with complicated computer systems, and the aspect of dealing with complicated computer system is the complex interactions between one component and the other one. Microbiome is similar. And what you end up doing is you don't look at a component precisely, you look at more canaries in the coal mine type of thing, things which are secondary indicators, because they will often point you back to what the primary cause is. In other words, you need to do a bit of transformation of the data. In this case, I look at the KEGG data, and there's KEGG enzymes, KEGG molecules, KEGG substrates, KEGG producers, a whole bunch of different aspects, all of which are tied back to specific bacteria. So what I ended up doing was investing time to create a predictor for how much of a particular enzyme, compound, mixture, modular, etc. is involved with a particular sample. So once I get a sample in, I can apply the formulas, which are from data derived from that side, which is based on the actual genetics of the bacteria, and do estimators. And what I found was that often those estimators had stronger statistical significance than I found with bacteria. But it wasn't consistent across the board for different symptoms. It jumps back and forth as to what it is, which makes sense because, for example, if, like what I recently found for autism, the enzyme which is absolutely most missing is something which people usually know as SAMe. The interesting is, it is blood tests on autistic children, a variety of other tests, and including some experiment with mice with ASD symptoms, was SAMe supplementation improved symptoms, or in the case of the blood test for autistic children, SAMe was found to be much lower in the blood than in the control group. In which case, suddenly we had some of the artistic characteristics are now connected to SAMe, very well established in conventional literature, but now we know why SAMe is low, because the bacteria in the gut doesn't produce enough of the SAMe enzymes. And SAMe is an enzyme. So, voila, we have a connection, we have a causality established. Not just the SAMe being low is a problem, but why is it low? And the why is low is because of the bacteria population in the microbiome of autistic child. So, with that said, it sort of said, okay, so went in and grind through things and ended up finding that the two things that gives the best associations are the bacteria and the enzymes. Compound occasionally shows up, but not as often as I would like it to show up. And by compounds, I mean chemicals being produced from the body or consumed by the body. And so trying to say, okay, where is the imbalance in the chemicals flowing around? Turns out that most of the time it's not a factor. So occasionally it is. But then again, we deal with a complicated system called the microbiome, inside another complicated system called the body. So what triggers something is going to be all over the place. And you have to accept that and figure out, okay, where is it this time? And looking at the data and looking at the statistics of it, you can see it. So it's not always going to be the same process. Okay, now, the thing I want to do first is to explain that we are not looking at, you don't have enough of this bacteria or that bacteria. We are often talking about issues which may go over 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 bacteria. 70 bacteria which you want to shift. 7 different bacteria which react to different compounds differently. In other words, we get into a very complicated thing. Fortunately, my training is operations research, and dealing with this type of problem is part of my academic training. So I know something about algorithms and the mathematics of being able to solve the problem. So let's try giving an analogy, and that's what we're going to look at next. An analogy of what we are trying to do in the hopes that you understand and shift away from it's a single bacteria issue or a single compound issue. It's not. It is a complicated issues, and generally, don't ask me to figure it out. It's beyond my mental ability, despite the fact that they are reasonably good. It's a matter for computer programs, artificial intelligence, Dr. AI, to figure out all the number, because the number of equations involved is huge. And you have to optimize across all those equations. And that is something which I rather leave the computer. It's faster, it's cheaper, and I don't get a headache trying to figure it out. Okay, let's take a look at our analogy example.